Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about a case that's been circulating on social media. I hadn't heard of it outside of social media, but I looked into it. What I have found has been deeply alarming. So let's just start off with the general fact that I don't think all childhood camps for behavioral issues are a problem. I don't think they're all toxic. By all means, there are obviously good ones out there. I do think it's interesting that every couple of years it seems like there's this cycle of finding out about a new fucked up camp that makes it onto the news, and then it turns out that this camp didn't just have one incident, there were multiple incidents, and then they are also usually typically in some way going against some regulation, some even sanitation practices I hear. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about a 12-year-old who suffocated to death at camp after he was confined in a fully enclosed bivy sack, Autopsy report says. I'll be pulling from two separate articles because one of them has more information that's pertinent. I'll link it down below and I'll be sprinkling it in here and there as we go. So it says, a boy from New York journeyed to North Carolina for camp but did not survive his first night, authorities said. Now his death is being investigated as a homicide. Hours after arriving at Trails, Carolina, a program for adolescents with behavioral or emotional issues, the 12-year-old suffocated in February after camp staff directed him to sleep in a fully enclosed bivy sack, a newly released autopsy report states. A bivy sack is a piece of sleeping equipment that usually includes waterproof material. The cause of death is asphyxia due to smothering, the autopsy report says. The manner of death is homicide. So I didn't really know what a bivy was, or I didn't associate the word with the thing. So in case you don't know, this is what a bivy looks like. I don't know if this article explains it later on, but basically there are two, it seems like, layers, and one of them is what could cause the asphyxia. Now obviously here it's ruled as homicide, so there's obviously a person involved, but apparently air circulation is already an issue if you leave everything zipped up, from what I understand. The boy's family, who lives in New York, has asked CNN to not publicize his name. The family didn't comment, so I'm just gonna move on. The Transylvania County Sheriff's Office said it is investigating the death. While no arrests have been made, investigators do have suspects. The sheriff's detective declined to answer any questions. So as of right now, even if there are suspects, there's nothing out there. In fact, this is news because this case came to light a while back, and then it was initially either unruled or ruled as an accident. I've seen articles with conflicting information, so it's one of those two. And now it's being ruled as a homicide, and that's kind of the update and why I'm talking about it now that there are more answers, so to speak. CNN has reached out to Trails, Carolina, which again is the name of this camp, for comment, while North Carolina authorities have started the process to permanently revoke the nature camp's license. Trails, Carolina could still appeal. We'll see what happens there. I don't think it should open again. Confined in a bivy enclosed with an alarm. So a bivy sack gives more protection than a sleeping bag alone, often eliminating the need to sleep in a tent when camping. Bivvies typically include a breathable inner layer that can be zipped up and an opaque, waterproof outer layer. It should be noted that a common warning on commercially available bivy products indicates that the outer, weather-resistant opening should not be fully secured, as it may lead to condensation and breathing restriction. The boy's autopsy report states, this information was obtained on basic web search. During the overnight hours between February 2nd and 3rd, the boy was directed to sleep in a fully enclosed bivy with an attached alarm that would alert counselors if the boy tried to leave, the autopsy report states. The child had previously left his bivy sack to sleep outside of it. The counselors woke him, made him re-enter the bivy. According to the camp's protocol, the boy was, quote-unquote, placed to sleep in a bivy with sleeping mat and a sleeping bag, the autopsy report states. Now, I already think this whole sleeping in a bivy thing is strange, and maybe I haven't been to enough of these weird camp things. Well, I haven't been to any, thank God. But I don't understand why you can't just sleep in a regular tent. If you're supposed to have the camp experience, why it can't just be a regular tent, first of all. And second of all, a lot of the behavior here seems punitive, and that's what's confusing to me, because why did he have to sleep in this bivy as opposed to outside? I understand for safety measures and all, but putting the alarms on also seems punitive. So I don't know, it doesn't really make sense to me. It almost seems like it's ill-equipped to deal with children that might have behavioral problems, because this is also mild, right? Sleeping outside of your sleeping bag is not crazy child behavior. What if the behavior was actually serious? That's why I'm kind of confused. What would they do with someone who actually was off the rails. Because as of now, I'm not saying this is a perfectly behaved kid, I have no idea, but this is not crazy behavior. The program's protocol required the bibby to be placed on top of a thick mill plastic sheet, which was folded up the sides in the form of a canoe. The opening to the bivvy was then secured with an alarm device such that if the occupant attempted to exit the bivvy, it would alarm and wake up the counselors in the cabin. So I don't know if this is a dumb question. What if he had to go to the bathroom? This is why this seems punitive to me, because it seems extremely restrictive of your movement for I don't know how many hours at night. Like, even if you just wanted to open the zips up to just breathe some fresh air, if you wanted to walk around for a second, you can't do any of that. And it's also like, why is a 12-year-old sleeping outside without... It makes no sense to me. Because at that point, you should have all, in my opinion, for safety measures as well, have everyone sleeping in a cabin so they're down the hall from you, as opposed to all of this. During the overnight hours, the counselor noticed the boy was moving around, but stopped moving shortly after, the autopsy report states. Routine checks were performed throughout the night, but due to the outer opaque layer of the bivvy being closed, he could not be visualized, the report says. In the morning, the counselors attempted to wake him, but noted he was not moving. Trails Carolina released multiple statements the days following the boy's death, and, you know, it's the usual PR shit of being shattered by the tragic loss of a life, which is something they have to say. I don't necessarily know how much I believe it. So in terms of the camp, I kind of wanted to get an idea of what exactly any of it means. Like, camps that are for children or adolescents with behavioral problems is such a vague thing, right? Because you might have a camp that's ha-ha, hee-hee activities and people holding hands and talking around the bonfire, as much as it might be actually military-style treatment of people who are not prepared or equipped for that. So in terms of that, it says Trails Carolina is an outcome-driven, nature-based therapy program in Lake Toxaway, North Carolina. The camp said in its February 6th statement, the program helps adolescents aged 10 to 17 years old work through behavioral or emotional difficulties, build trusting relationships with their family and peers, and achieve academic success. So this is already extremely broad, and of course it has to be broad, because if it's too specific, the camp won't, you know, pertain to more than like 2 people. That makes sense. But let me continue, and then I'll explain something else I found. The camp pairs psychological counseling with a variety of outdoor activities, including hiking, backpacking, camping, rock climbing, and equine-assisted emotional work, Trails Carolina said. Following the boy's death and an investigation into the camp, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services started the process of revoking Trails Carolina license, according to documents obtained by CNN. This whole thing about who this camp was for was what I really wanted to know. Like, what behavioral issues, like what does this entail exactly? Like, what is the type of clientele we would expect to find there? So, age 10 to 17, behavioral or emotional difficulties. I already feel like that's extremely vague, because are we talking about behavioral and emotional difficulties that have to do with a traumatic event, or is it like a mental illness that's spanned for 10 years? Like, what are we talking about exactly? Because that too makes me also question, what kind of staff did they have there? Because if it's just a camp to have kids have a good time and get out of a dark place they're in, that's one thing. If we're talking about kids that are diagnosed with depression, anxiety, PTSD, okay, well, does the camp have psychiatric help that is equipped for all of this? Which I don't know if it did. So when I went to this other source that I found, it says, and I was not expecting this, the camp was known for serving children with behavioral issues and diagnoses, including ADHD, autism, and post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm confused. That seems extremely broad to me, and maybe, you know, I'm just not informed. If there are any therapists in the comments, by all means, let me know. Any psychological professionals, let me know. But that seems like way too broad a thing. Autism and PTSD in the same conversation to me seems bizarre, and maybe there are some things in common, maybe there are some practices in common, but as someone who had PTSD and did therapy for that, that's already different than therapy I've done for anxiety or depression. So I'm wondering how does all of this work? Because to me it seems like they're trying to put too much in one place. But again, I could be wrong. Then it says that in recent years, many former Trails Carolina campers have spoken out against the organization. Several ex-participants have alleged abuse and mistreatment. So now there's apparently an Instagram page dedicated to sharing stories about Trails Carolina. And one person there, and this is just an allegation, so take it with a grain of salt, The girl called the camp a quote-unquote prison and said she was made to hike through hurricane weather and was often battered and bruised as a result of extreme physical activity. Trails was one of the most traumatizing things in my life, and even my mom regrets sending me there. To this day, she wrote, "I would never wish my worst enemy there." And this is a common thread that I've seen with this camp and other camps that are also supposed to basically kick teenagers in the ass, as far as I've noted, is that there's almost always crazy physical activity, and of course sports, being outside, blah blah, that's fine, but that's a very different level than doing grueling activity that, again, like I said before, feels punitive. A lot of this seems like it has a negative underbelly to everything. It never seems like they're actually doing team building or anything like that. And like I said, that's a generalization, but I'm only talking about the cases that we see in the news, which inevitably, if they're on the news, there's probably something wrong there. Anyway, you guys can let me know if you found anything about this, if you have any experience with camps like this. I'd be curious to know, because the more I see, the scarier it all seems to me. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.